In this video, we're diving into some of the best designed cards in Magic history. Obviously, good design is somewhat subjective, but this list represents some of the cards that I think offer cool effects, interesting ideas, or elegant solutions to design puzzles. Let's kick off with Millstone. This simple little machine birthed the first real alternate win condition in the game's history. It created a quirky and beloved niche strategy, and coined a phrase that would quickly become part of the Magic lexicon and eventually official rules text. Decades later, the design still holds up. Ajani's Pridemate is a fun, efficient card that rewards players for doing something they already like to do. Unsurprisingly, it became a fan favorite. Few designs so perfectly capture what players find exciting. Small wins that snowball into something huge. Over the years, this ability has appeared on vampires, clerics, druids, soldiers, unicorns, angels, demons, zombies, even enchantments and walls, a testament to its popularity. Ravnica City of Guilds was a groundbreaking set in many ways, but arguably its most important contribution was the Shocklands. They were born out of the fusion of the Painlands and the Taplands, along with the basic land types of the original Alpha Duels. Instead of the repetitive bookkeeping of Painlands, the cost was front-loaded. A single shock to your life total at the moment of entry. This was a huge innovation. Even the Shocklands names set a precedent. Instead of hyper-specific card names that locked cycles to one plane, like Shivan Reef, Shocklands were given flexible, more abstract and atmospheric names like Watery Grave, making reprints easy. Few cards are as steeped in Magic's history as Urza's Saga. It does several things at once. It references the name of one of Magic's most legendary sets, famous for its high power level, playing into the larger history of cards with set names. Plus, it broke ground as the first enchantment land, and it fused two existing subtypes, the Urza's land type from 8th edition and the Saga subtype that debuted in Dominaria. The mechanics themselves narrate the story of Magic's most infamous artificer. It initially only taps for mana, representing Urza's humble beginnings as a creator. Then its second ability hints at Urza's growing talent for building constructs, while its final ability can bring out some of the most powerful artifacts in existence, representing the height of Urza's powers. In the end, Urza's Saga is a rare achievement, a land that tells a story, does something interesting on the battlefield, and pays homage to decades of design, all in a single card. Few 2-drops in the history of the game strike such a perfect balance. Dark Confidant is very strong, yet it feels fair because it demands risk and careful sequencing. It also expresses Black's philosophy incredibly well in both mechanics and flavor text. The cycle of Titans in M11 share the same formula. An evergreen keyword and an effect that triggers both when they enter the battlefield and whenever they attack. The brilliance lay in the enter or attack design. Attack triggers alone are often too slow, requiring a full turn before you see value. By pairing them with ETB triggers, the Titans gave you immediate impact and ongoing payoff. That template proved so effective that R&D has revisited it hundreds of times since. These creatures also established Titan as a lasting brand within the game, a label Wizards has returned to time and again, most recently with Flage. Knight of the Reliquary has all the hallmarks of great card design. It opens up endless choices in deck construction, and once it's on the battlefield, every activation feels like a new puzzle. Mindslaver took a wildly ambitious concept and made it reality. In the process, it paved the way for cards like Emrakul the Promised End, as well as other daring, punchy phrases like Time Stops, End the Turn. Fire and Ice has two halves that are equally relevant, and both fit nicely into the same deck. Fire is a tidy removal spell, pinging 2 creatures or finishing off a weakened one. Ice, meanwhile, freezes a permanent while replacing itself, disrupting mana or buying you a crucial turn. Different effects, but both generate tempo and keep the game moving in your favor. That flexibility made the card a staple for years, from its early days in Standard all the way to Modern. Top-down cards can often feel forced, but Demonic Pact pulls its concept off perfectly. With minimal words, it lays out a sequence of choices that tell a story, while also presenting a fascinating mechanical puzzle. Vendilion Click has fallen out of competitive favor in recent years, but its play patterns remain fascinating. It doesn't naturally generate a 2-for-1, which keeps it interactive and fair. The skill is in how it's used. Akroma was a major figure in the Onslaught block story, so the card designers gave her strong, memorable abilities to match. As an angel, she naturally had flying and vigilance, harking back to Serra Angel. White could justify protection, so she gained protection from red and from black. Then the designers pushed the envelope by adding First Strike, Trample, and even Haste, making Akroma the only mono-white creature in Magic to have that last ability. All this adds up to a card that's pure spectacle in the best way. Thalia is one of the best expressions of White's identity, since she's an aggro-balanced body with a tax effect that applies to all players. She doesn't end games on her own, but she reshapes them significantly. Ball Lightning was an important card in defining Red's color identity, combining aggro creatures and direct damage into a single concept. It has haste, so it could swing the turn it entered, trample, so damage punched through blockers, sky-high power balanced by fragile toughness, and a built-in sacrifice clause at end of turn. In play, it feels like pure electricity unleashed. Doran the Siege Tower does so much all at once. It teaches you something about the world it inhabits. It carries an unusual cost and stats that feel instantly memorable. It presented a never-before-seen mechanic in just a handful of words, and its flavor text ties everything together. This design emerged because R&D noticed that many treefolk had much greater toughness than power. Going back to Magic's earliest days, they gave Doran the ability to turn this beefy toughness into a weapon, giving treefolk a true identity, and breaking open design space that would be explored dozens of times over the coming years. Figure of Destiny was ahead of its time in the way it depicted progression on a single card. Starting as a humble 1/1 Kithkin, it could slowly evolve through activations, first into a 2/2 Spirit, then a 4/4 Spirit Warrior, and finally an 8/8 flying first striking avatar. One card, one character, and yet an entire story of transformation. Players adored it, and the design space proved rich. Figure of Destiny directly inspired the level up mechanic in Rise of the Eldrazi, and later the class enchantments in Adventures in the Forgotten Realms. It even helped pave the way for double-faced cards, which also capture ideas of change and evolution. At face value, Wall of Blossoms is as simple as they come. A 2-mana 0/4 with Defender that draws you a card when it enters the battlefield. Nothing flashy, nothing complicated, and yet, when it was first printed, it was nothing short of revolutionary. This was because, in the early days of Magic, ETB triggers on creatures were rare, and more often than not, they were drawbacks. Wall of Blossoms broke that mold. A sturdy 2-drop that instantly refunded itself in card draw meant no tempo loss. In hindsight, this was the gateway to an entire design philosophy. Since the beginning, Lightning Bolt has been the yardstick against which all burn is measured. It's efficient and strong without being broken, landing in the sweet spot of the boon cycle. Fact or Fiction creates one of the most enduring mini-games in the history of the game, forcing opponents to craft piles as evenly as possible, knowing you'll always take whichever side is stronger for you. New players can grok it instantly, yet the strategic depth keeps veterans hooked, especially when you start exploring graveyard synergies like Past in Flames. And in multiplayer, Fact or Fiction becomes a political tool, an invitation to bargains and threats. Few creatures embody their color as perfectly as Snapcaster Mage. Blue thrives on casting spells at instant speed and bending time to its advantage. And here's a creature that does exactly that, with a body that matters just enough. Not for nothing, Bolt, Snap, Bolt became an iconic line. Sometimes the magic of card design comes down to costing something just within the boundaries of reason. Time Walk is a busted relic from a different era, but Time Warp gave its effect the perfect mana cost to balance it out. I'll include all the forces as one design idea. The original pitch cycle appeared back in Alliances, led by Force of Will. These cards came about because R&D wanted to give players spells they could cast even when all their lands were tapped. Force of Will shattered the assumption that being tapped out meant being defenseless. That precedent opened the door for countless free effects over the years. Alternate costs involving life payments, exiling cards from hand or graveyard, sacrificing permanents, fulfilling specific conditions, etc. The entire philosophy of Magic's alternate costs traces back to this one card. Force of Vigor and Force of Negation built well on the legacy of Force of Will, providing Modern with great break glass in case of emergency options to stop degenerate plays. Fatal Push is one of the cleanest removal spells from the last decade of Magic, even if some might argue that it's a little bit too well pushed. It was tailored to be strong in Standard while secretly calibrated to shine brightest in Modern, a balancing act that Wizards rarely pulls off so well. Its synergy with the fetch lands makes it fantastic in the latter format. Simple, sharp, and cleverly tuned to two different environments at the same time. At first glance, Lava Dart looks unassuming, but the secret lies in its flashback. Sacrifice a mountain to cast it again. Suddenly, this modest little spell is pulling far more weight than you'd expect. Judgment was the first set to experiment with non-mana flashback costs, and while it produced classics like Prismatic Strands, Battle Screech, and Cabal Therapy, it's Lava Dart that feels the most elegant. In effect, it offers 2 points of damage, more akin to a split forked bolt. And in red aggro decks, the non-mana flashback cost was a big deal. Extra lands were expendable, and turning them into damage kept the pressure high. Since being reprinted in Modern Horizons, Lava Dart has become a potent weapon in prowess shells as well. This cute flying fish has always been a masterclass in versatility. Divination with wings is already solid, and it even has blink and reanimation synergies as well. It's the perfect evoke elemental. Speaking of things being perfect, Liliana of the Veil is in many ways the most elegant planeswalker ever printed. Her abilities couldn't be cleaner. Tick up, each player discards. Tick down, force your opponent to sacrifice a creature. Ultimate, and you're essentially playing a fact or fiction minigame, but this time with your opponent's permanents on the line. Each mode is simple, intuitive, and deeply resonant with Black's philosophy. Power, but always at a cost. I also love the simplicity of Jace Beleren. This humble planeswalker remains one of the game's best mechanical depictions of a blue mage. Among the long history of charms, none hits harder than Boros Charm. It's the perfect example of why the charm model works. 3 compact options, each one powerful in the right moment, and together forming a versatile tool. More than that, every mode speaks directly to Red-White's identity. Direct damage to finish games, indestructibility to protect your team, and double strike to turn a single threat into a winning swing. Dam is the natural offspring of Wrath of God and Damnation, stitched together with a wink toward the Overload mechanic. Simple, flavorful, and historically loaded. Mystic Snake belongs to the wonderful fusion school of card design, the same lineage that gave us Lightning Helix and Absorb. For 4 mana, a mix of green and double blue, you get a modest 2/2 creature with flash that carries the text of one of Magic's most famous instants, Counter Target Spell. Break down the cost and the concept becomes crystal clear. One green and a generic mana buys you grizzly bears, and the double blue buys you counterspell. This idea of creatures that could counter spells on ETB would prove a rich vein for card design. Psychic Frog may push the envelope a bit, its legacy ban proves as much, but from a design standpoint, it's a fascinating piece of work. It clearly nods to the old powerhouse Psychotog, yet it also ventures into fresh territory, exploring new angles of what a Dimir threat can look like. The highlight here is how its abilities interlock. Each mode feels purposeful on its own, but together they weave into a seamless, self-contained engine. A whole that's more than the sum of its parts. You can't lose the game, and your opponents can't win the game. A radical, rule-breaking idea back in 2003, and one that went down well. Platinum Angel was one of the most popular cards from Mirrodin. Its legacy is vast. It inspired spells with you can't lose the game effects, as well as planeswalkers that grant the same shield, and even inverse designs like Abyssal Persecutor. Mishra's Factory is a land that can be tapped for mana, but could also transform into a 2/2 assembly worker artifact creature until end of turn. The smoothness of the design made it an instant success. As a result, Mishra's Factory laid the foundation for all of the so-called manlands. Every land that animates into a creature owes its existence to this forward-thinking design. Until next time, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and consider joining my Patreon. Also, let me know of your favorite card designs in the comments.